So we have a really interesting update in the current lawsuit against the ATF and their pistol brace rule, including the nationwide vacatur of that rule and removing the restrictions on brace pistols and trying to treat them as SBR. So we need to talk about what just happened because there was some very interesting developments. Now, really quick before we jump into this video, I want to thank one of the main supporters of this channel, which is Kershaw Knives. A lot of you guys know that Kershaw Knives has been supporting this channel pretty much since the beginning. They're an amazing company. They support what we do here. I love their knives. I carry their Kershaw Iridium knife every single day for my EDC. One of the new knives that I just picked up is the Bel Air. If you want to check that out, go over to their website. And if you use the code ARMED40, you can get 40% off of your order. Now, like I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we need to talk about some important developments in this case, dealing with the ATF pistol brace rule, the restrictions on braced pistols as SBRs, and trying to expand the definition of what an SBR is. And there's been some interesting developments in this lawsuit in light of one of the recent decisions that was issued by the lower court. The ATF has been suffering a lot of losses recently. In various cases, they've lost, major decisions, especially after the Supreme Court issued their decision in Cargill with the relation to bump stocks and the bump stock lawsuit. There's been a lot of things that are changing. And one of the things that also has changed a lot is this specific issue about treating brace pistols as SBRs. Right now, the ATF is trying to use the Supreme Court's recent 8-1 decision in Rahimi to support the restrictions on brace pistols as actual SBRs. Now, recently in this lawsuit, the ATF lost big because the lower court judge, Judge O'Connor, issued a motion for summary judgment in favor of the plaintiffs and struck down the entire pistol brace rule as invalid. And that has put the ATF in a hard position because they lost both at the preliminary injunction stage, and they had already appealed that and were seeking review of that on appeal. But then they lost once again at the lower court level on a motion for summary judgment, a final merits decision, essentially ending this case at the lower court level. And now there was a lot of back and forth where the ATF was saying, and some of the plaintiffs were saying, that the preliminary injunction, that review in the first week of August was moot, it was invalid, didn't need to happen really anymore, and instead all that would need to happen was a review of the final merits decision. And so now the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals has decided to consolidate the motion to dismiss the case for it being moot, and then also the preliminary injunction hearing that was set to take place on the first week of August. They've consolidated both of those issues and sent it out to actually be heard and argued during the first week of September. Now, why that's important about this, very interesting calendar move is the fact that essentially what the Fifth Circuit is signaling here is that they are going to give the ATF an opportunity, of course, to appeal the final merits decision, seek review of the final merits decision, and then also probably moot the preliminary injunction and only hear the final merits. And that's really because the only thing that truly matters in this case right now is that final merits decision. That is the big one that everybody is going to be watching. Now, what's really important about what Judge O'Connor did in his decision is he didn't find that this was a violation of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment, I believe, was a secondary issue involved in this case, but primarily this was a decision based on the APA. What Judge O'Connor found is that the ATF violated the logical outgrowth test, which is part of some of the APA analysis, because what the ATF did is they put in place originally this rule through a proposed rulemaking. We had a notice and commenting period. And in the proposed rule, there was the worksheet 4999. That was a, kind of a report card system. Like we were a bunch of kindergartners, they had a point system and a report card system where you would have to look at this report card, add points together, and determine whether or not your brace pistol was actually an SBR. So that's what they had in the proposed rule. Now, we all commented against that, said that of course was dumb. And then what the ATF decided to do was completely scrap that and move to a more broad and subjective standard when they had the final rule. And what Judge O'Connor found is that this drastic shift from the proposed rule to the final rule was a violation of the APA. It did not align with the logical outgrowth test, and therefore he struck down the entire rule, vacated it, and found that it was invalid. That decision, along with a lot of other decisions which happened with the engaged in business decision, we have the Vanderstock frames and receivers rule that was struck down, and then also recently you had the Supreme Court in a 6-3 decision strike down the ATF bump stock rule as invalid, as overreached by the ATF. All of those really put the ATF in a hard position. And right now they are waiting to appeal the final merits decision. They're going to do that, of course. But one of the plaintiffs in this lawsuit wasn't waiting for all that to develop. They argued that the preliminary injunction, that whole review was moot, and essentially nothing should happen in this case until the ATF decides if they're going to appeal the final merits decision. So there was a hearing that was set during the first week of August 5th about the preliminary injunction, but a majority of the plaintiffs are saying, no, we don't need to even have that. The only thing that matters right now is that new final decision by Judge O'Connor. Now, you may be asking yourself, why does this matter whether or not the Fifth Circuit here is set to review the preliminary injunction on August 5th, or whether or not they are going to consolidate the whole mootness issue and the review of this and pushing it out to September? Well, really, that's again because it determines, how this case is going to proceed forward. And keep in mind that a lot of the protections that are currently in place are kind of two-tiered. The first kind of level of protection that we got when it came to the ATF pistol brace rule was the limited preliminary injunctions that were focused on just protecting organizations, companies, their customers, and those organizational memberships as well. And the preliminary injunctions that are set to be reviewed in September now is specifically on that first level. Now we have the new decision by Judge O'Connor, which is a nationwide vacature of the rule. We're waiting for that ATF appeal of that. But when it comes to nationwide vacatures of rules, these broad protections, the ATF has been very weary about issuing those blanket protections. The Supreme Court, again, doesn't like broad-reaching vacatures. So it's questionable whether or not that would stand. And so we still need that first level of protection that was issued by the preliminary injunctions. I would love for both levels of protection to still be in place. I know a lot of people argue that, yes, the preliminary injunctions are now irrelevant, but I'd rather them still kind of be in place in the background, just in case something happens with the nationwide vacature, so that we could still rely on those preliminary injunctions, because what I would not want to happen is for them to be found moot, to be removed, and then us ultimately have something bad happen at the Fifth Circuit level or a stay to be issued, and then us have to go once again back down to Judge O'Connor, file once again for a preliminary injunction, get limited protections while the appeal on the merits is happening. It just could add to a lot of issues, a lot of confusion about what is legal for pistol braces, what is not legal. I'd rather just everything maintain the status quo. And I think that's probably what's going to happen. The Fifth Circuit has been very good about maintaining the status quo. And if you're asking what the status quo is right now, like I said, you have two tiers of protection. You have the limited preliminary injunctions, which are protecting, two-way organizations and their membership. And then you have this new nationwide vacature. So nationwide, the rule is vacated, but even that's a little bit shaky about whether or not that's going to stand on appeal. And that's one of the things that's going to be questioned on appeal. Now, one of the other very interesting developments in this lawsuit is the fact that now the ATF is trying to use the recent 8-1 decision in Rahimi as support for why the lower court's outright vacature of the rule was in fact wrong, and why that nationwide vacature should be removed. And that's also going to be something that puts the nationwide vacature kind of on shaky ground when it comes up on appeal. The ATF argues that under the facial challenge analysis in Rahimi, this case here should be sent back down to Judge O'Connor for a new analysis in a form of relief that is a little bit more limited in scope. The ATF also argues that there's some language in Rahimi that supports their restrictions on what the ATF believes are dangerous and unusual firearms. Essentially, they're saying brace pistols are SBRs and SBRs are dangerous and unusual, and the Rahimi decision supports our restrictions on those items. So not really surprising that the ATF is arguing now that Rahimi supports their historical analysis and allows these types of expansions of the SBR laws, and that those expansions should stand. This is the type of argument, unfortunately, that Justice Thomas was concerned about when he dissented from the majority's opinion in Rahimi. Thomas wanted to keep the Bruin analysis as tight and limited as possible to essentially avoid these types of wiggle room arguments that the ATF is now trying to exploit and make when it comes to pistol braces. But that's just something that's going to have to play out. There's a lot of other questions about universal relief, like I mentioned, and some citations to the Supreme Court precedent about universal relief. And so that's what's going to be questioned on appeal. And now that all of these calendars and consolidations are happening, it's going to be a question about whether or not the limited protections are going to be removed off the board, whether or not we're only going to move forward when it comes to the nationwide vacature of the pistol brace rule. And then also there's going to just be general questions about whether or not that nationwide vacature was proper or not. So if anything else changes, I will let you guys know. Also, if you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of two-way news. But as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.